I have a sermon to read to you today, which was written and originally presented by Reverend Rod Richards. He is the minister of Unitarian Universalist of San Luis Obispo, California. And he begins the sermon with a reading by the novelist and essayist George Saunders. It is an excerpt from a graduation address he delivered at Syracuse University, and it's entitled, "Congratulations, by the way, some thoughts on kindness." He said, "I can look back and see that I've spent much of my life in a cloud of things that have tended to push being kind to the periphery. Things like anxiety, fear, insecurity, ambition, the mistaken belief that enough accomplishment will rid me of all the anxiety, fear, insecurity, and ambition. The belief that if I can only accrue enough through accomplishment, money, fame, my neuroses will disappear. I've been in this fog certainly since at least my own graduation day. This book, let me succeed at this job and afford this house and raise these kids. And then finally, when all of that gets accomplished, I'll get started on the kindness." Except it never all gets accomplished. It's a cycle that can go on, well, forever. So, quick, end of speech advice. Since, according to me, your life is going to be a gradual process of becoming kinder and more loving, hurry up. Speed it along. Start right now. There's a confusion in each of us, a sickness really, selfishness. But there's also a cure. Be a good and proactive and even somewhat desperate patient on your own behalf. Seek out the most efficacious anti-selfishness medicines energetically for the rest of your life. Find out what makes you kinder, what opens you up, and brings out the most loving, generous, and unafraid version of you. And go after those things as if nothing else matters. Because, actually, nothing else does. To the extent that you can, err in the direction of kindness. Do those things that incline you towards the big questions and avoid the things that would reduce you and make you trivial. That luminous part of you that exists beyond personality, your soul, if you will, that is as bright and shining as any that has ever been. Bright as Shakespeare's, bright as Gandhi's, bright as Mother Teresa's. Clear away everything that keeps you separate from this secret luminous place. Believe that it exists. Come to know it better. Nurture it. Share its fruits tirelessly. And that's just the reading. Reverend Richard's sermon begins, "Home on the Range." Almost everyone knows the words to that, right? At least the first verse or two. I do too. But there's one verse I always get wrong. It comes right after that wonderful image of deer and antelope playing. I always wonder what they're playing. Hide and seek, freeze tag, bocce ball, I don't know. But right after the deer and the antelope are playing whatever it is that they're playing, comes this. "Where seldom is heard an encouraging word." An encouraging word. That's the way I hear it in my mind. And then I have to correct myself to remember the real words of the song, "Where seldom is heard a discouraging word." Can you imagine a place like that, where one seldom hears discouraging things? That's not the range I've been living on. Rather, it's been a matter of how many discouraging things I can handle hearing today, and how can I possibly respond to them all? How can I possibly respond to any of them? Discouragement, after all, is the feeling that any response I come up with will be insufficient, ineffective, futile. Discouragement drains me of my belief that what I do matters, of my conviction that I can make a difference, of my sense that I matter. Discouragement robs me of courage. How can I ever replenish courage, restore courage, if I am in this world where an encouraging word is seldom heard? This is extremely important and dangerous, because life, any kind of meaningful engagement with life, requires us to risk being vulnerable. And taking such a risk requires courage. And let's face it, it is far, far, far easier to discourage or to be discouraged than it is to encourage or to be encouraged. Encouragement blows up the balloon. Discouragement pops it. Encouragement requires intention. Discouragement can be a quick and thoughtless act. And discouragement not only works faster, it can pop 10 to 20 or 30 or more balloons in the time it takes to blow up one. I can find reasons to be discouraged everywhere. I can be discouraged by the way someone looks at me and the withering look that they've given me that I am so sure is a judgment on my own personhood. It could have nothing to do with me at all. That person, it might have been caused by indigestion or a painful memory or an expression that I misread altogether. I can be discouraged by things I hear, I see, I read. Turn on the news, any device you choose, and prepare for discouragement. And a positive news story is quickly swept up in the dire and depressing tone of all the rest, and what I come to be convinced is humanity's rush towards death and destruction. I can be discouraged by personal circumstances. The problematic relationship can overshadow and even lead me to question the more healthy and supportive relationships I enjoy. The stress in my life can quickly overwhelm the peace I have nurtured. The pain can convince me it's eternal, while I know the joy is fleeting. For whatever reasons, humans seem programmed to believe the negative. In Dr. Phil speak, it takes 1,000 attaboys to erase one "you're an idiot." Now, whatever you think of Dr. Phil or the phrasing he chooses, there's a truth there. A negative message, a discouraging message, tends to take on a greater significance than a positive one, an encouraging message. And if this is even close to the truth, it seems like we here should be paying attention to how we are encouraged and how we can encourage others. How do we increase our capacity for courage? Now, courage, it's a powerful word. To be seen as courageous is no small thing. Then why is it, I wondered, that encouragement and discouragement sound to my ear, kind of wimpy? They're often used with mild modifiers that make it seem like they're slight alterations in one way or another in our feelings. They just need a little encouragement. Yes, the news is kind of discouraging. And also, Rather than being associated with courage, many of the definitions of encouragement and discouragement seem to have more to do with controlling, or even less charitably, trying to manipulate a situation or guarantee a particular outcome. Here are a couple of definitions of encourage from the online Merriam-Webster dictionary. 1, urge. They encouraged him to go back to school. Foster. Government grants designed to encourage conservation. Now granted, these are second and third definitions in the dictionary, but culturally speaking, I think they've become primary. We encourage and discourage particular behavior. We encourage not people, but particular outcomes. Or we encourage people only so far as they help us achieve particular outcomes. Yes, you should encourage more of that. No, don't encourage them to do that. But is that all encouragement means? What does this have to do with its root word? The word that which I have decided is so crucial to living itself, courage. What if I want to encourage a person and not a plan? What if I wish to recapture the first definition of encourage in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to inspire with courage, spirit, or hope? So, writes Reverend Richards, I looked closer to my home, my congregation, the UU Church of San Luis Obispo in California. And I began by reading its mission. And for those of us here at All Souls, here is their simple yet eloquent mission statement. Our mission is to deepen connections by nurturing spiritual growth, practicing justice, and inspiring joy. No mention of courage. I searched the covenant of our church. Here it is. Holding this community dear and inspired by our common principles, we covenant to respect and trust each other, accept our differences and shortcomings, practice patience, compassion, and empathy, listen deeply, speak truthfully, be honest and authentic, support the congregation with our presence, participation, and financial gifts, celebrate our life together. That's beautiful. No mention of courage. I searched our 6 sources, some of the fundamentals of our UU faith. No mention of courage. And finally, our famous 7 principles. 1 mention of courage. And not courage all by itself, but sandwiched within that word, encouragement. There it is. And it made me wonder how often I'd skipped over this principle as a nice but fairly passive statement. Yes, we'll be nice to each other and accept and encourage. Okay, let's get to the real stuff. Changing the world, interdependent web, truth, justice, inherent worth and dignity, all that. I tend to dismiss the importance of what is right there in that step. Acceptance and encouragement. And today, I especially want to highlight the word encouragement. What is this principle calling us to do? At first glance, it may appear that encouragement here is directed not so much toward a person as an outcome. We are not just encouraging people, but encouraging spiritual growth in our congregations. Isn't that a little controlling? Directive, even manipulative in a spiritual sort of way? I would say no. And here's why. It doesn't define spiritual growth for the individual, but it may just be that spiritual growth, however we come to define it for ourselves, has something to do with deepening connections and risking vulnerability and engaging the inherent insecurity of living, all of which requires courage. So we call ourselves to encourage one another so that we may, in the words of UU authors Beverly and David Bumbaugh, so that we may call out of each other's strengths, wisdom, and compassion that we never knew we had. There's a Passover Haggadah that's in the back of our hymnal that's often used as a chalice lighting. It says, "May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom." And if I could add one line to that, it would be this: to encourage and not to discourage. Sounds like a small thing, but it's vitally important. And sometimes it only takes a slight adjustment in our perspective, a change in focus from the problem to the person, a stepping outside of ourselves and our own feelings or viewpoint or purpose to see another. In the reading today, George Saunders said, "I can look back and see that I've spent most of my life in a cloud of things that I've tended to push being kind to the periphery. Things like anxiety, fear, insecurity, ambition, the mistaken belief that if I can only accrue enough, my neuroses will disappear." And it reminds me of some words from Julia Ward Howe's journal of 1874. "Ambitious people climb, but faithful people build." Ambitious people climb, but faithful people build. We are faithfully building a community of kindness where seldom is heard a discouraging word. And I don't mean that we deny reality. I don't mean we censor information that has the potential to discourage. We're not putting our fingers in our ears and covering our eyes to avoid addressing the challenges we face, whether personal or congregational, or in our community, or in the wider world. I mean that we put those things in context with other truths that we carry, expressed in our principles and sources and covenant and mission. We trust that we can call out of each other strengths, wisdom, and compassion that we never knew we had. And I don't mean that we encourage one another in a facile or a fakey manner. My earlier balloon metaphor may have given you the impression that encouragement is a lot of hot air. Not what I was going for. There are few things more discouraging than false or superficial encouragement that does not recognize, in the words of the writer Annie Dillard, the other's beautiful face and complex nature. We encourage not by glossing over the inevitable failings of human beings, but by affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person amid our failings and our struggles. Encouragement is not a lot of hot air, but it may have to do with breath in the way that one of our hymns suggests. When I breathe out love. I concur with Saunders' advice to the 2013 graduating class at Syracuse University when he said, "To the extent that you can, err in the direction of kindness. Do those things that incline you towards the big questions and avoid the things that would reduce you and make you trivial. The luminous part of you that exists beyond personality, your soul, if you will, is as bright and shining as any that has ever been. Bright as Shakespeare's, bright as Gandhi's, bright as Mother Teresa's. Clear away everything that keeps you separate from this secret luminous place. Believe that it exists. Come to know it better. Nurture it. Share its fruits tirelessly." Nurture it. Share its fruits tirelessly. That is, I think, what we mean when we say in the mission of Reverend Richard's church that we will deepen connections by nurturing spiritual growth. We encourage each other along this path because we know that it takes great, quiet, persistent courage to carry it out daily in the face of so much discouragement. And we also know how powerful it can be, what it can inspire. Faithful people build, and we build one another up through acceptance and encouragement, through recognition of that luminous part of each of us. Now, though courage is not mentioned directly in the mission of Reverend Richard's congregation, it's there, nevertheless. Deepening connections inspires courage. When we proclaim the gospel that each human being is infinitely precious, when we realize that the meaning of our lives lies hidden in our interactions with each other, when we encounter each other with wonder, appreciation, and expectation. In today's world, encouraging words are seldom heard, but we will speak them here, and we will embrace and uphold that encouragement that is wordless, letting inward love guide our deeds and acceptance open our hearts. So may it be.